Live from Seoul this morning. Thanks so much for that. Appreciate it. Let's go to our panel now. Ed Husic and Josh Frydenberg. Josh Frydenberg, I want to get your thoughts first of all. You've heard the latest from the Korean Peninsula. What do you make of it? Is there a risk Australia could get dragged into any such conflict if it does unfold because of our allegiance back in the 50s to South Korea in a conflict that never really ended?
Well, you're right to say this is of great concern to Australia because any instability in the regime involving North Korea could have a terrible fallout. And the fact is, Kim Jong-un, at 29 years of age, is very unproven and unpredictable. He does have up to a dozen nuclear weapons. He has a standing army of more than 1 million men, and he has sophisticated ballistic missile technology. The point is, while those missiles couldn't reach the American mainland or even Guam or Hawaii, let alone Australia, they could reach Japan, where America has more than 35,000 military personnel stationed, or in South Korea, where the Americans have about 30,000 troops. And, you know, the North Koreans have 10,000 artillery pieces directed at South Korea across the demilitarised zone, and the demilitarised zone is only 30 kilometres away from Seoul. So this could easily spiral out of hand, and Kim Jong-un, unlike Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, his father and his grandfather, he doesn't have that secure domestic power base. So I am very, very concerned, and I think the Americans would react strongly were the North Koreans to do what they did 3 years ago, which was to shell a South Korean island or to sink a South Korean naval vessel, which they did in 2010, killing 46 South Korean sailors.
And Ed Husic, the US certainly not taking any chances. 2 destroyers sent to the region, also B-52 fighter jets, nuclear-capable jets and other aircraft. So they're not taking any chances, are they?
No, you can't. As much as people sort of indicate that, you know, this type of sabre rattling goes on from time to time within North Korea, you, as you rightly point out in the question, can't take this you know, just sitting down and writing it off or dismissing it as some sort of nonsensical power play. It is a fairly serious move. I think the US is right to be concerned, as we all are, and in particular I think it's good to see China and Russia both urging restraint as well, and China will have a critical role to play here. North Korea has seemed to, in the last few days, go out of its way to be provocative, particularly to China, and I think that's of great concern. But I think those calls for restraint are absolutely crucial.
All right, let's bring the news back home. I want to talk about some of the politics around this morning. First to you, Ed. Reports in the Daily Telegraph that the crossbench MPs are crowing that they've won $1.5 billion extra for their electorates by propping up the government. This is Oakeshott, Windsor, Wilkie saying that they've been able to extract that sort of a level of commitments from the government for their own local areas. What do you say to that? Are Labor MPs being dudded by a government placating independence?
Well, I think all of us as MPs have a responsibility to do the best absolute possible job for our local areas, and so, you know, they're doing that. I certainly have to say I raised an eyebrow yesterday. I've been trying to get an MRI for my local hospital at Mount Druitt for ages, as has the member before me, Roger Price, and I have to say I raised my eyebrows yesterday when I saw that we were giving $20 million to see the production of 20,000 leagues under the sea. I don't need 20,000 leagues of sea. I need an MRI at Mount Druitt Hospital. And just before, I think the audio's scratchy, but I suspect I can hear a smile creaking on Josh's face, just so he knows too. Your state Liberal mates in an area where obesity, diabetes and heart disease is of big concern. The state Liberal government's closing down our cardiac ward, so it's a bit hard for us to get machinery or get equipment and then have wards closed. Either way, we need to see more in our local area instead of less, and as I said, I can't see why we're putting $20 million into a film when we've got bread and butter issues that we need to deal with out in Western Sydney.
Josh, you wouldn't really disagree with Ed taking the case for his electorate, which isn't that well off comparably to other electorates, not the least of which your own?
Well, I would disagree with Ed because the federal government's been shortchanging the state governments in health, just like in Victoria, with Tanya Plibersek taking $107 million out of Victoria's health budget, which led to closure of beds and also sacking of staff. So, you know, Ed, get those facts right to start with. The point is, with the independents, They have shortchanged their own electorates by going to the Prime Minister and demanding $1 billion, $1.5 billion for this and for that. They're effectively propping up a terrible government, a government that led us into $145 billion of debt and growing, the government that's given us the carbon tax, which has led to an increase in cost of living. So at the end of the day, those independents, Kieran, are equally culpable. They're equally culpable for the failures of this government because they've been propping it up, and the Prime Minister, because of a politically desperate situation, has to go and buy their votes, and that's why so many Australians are sick and tired of this government and are demanding an early election.
Hey, I know it's morning TV and I don't want to repeat Tony Abbott's very uncouth line to Tony Windsor about what he'd do during the negotiations for securing minority government, but wasn't it $1 billion you guys promised Andrew Wilkie for his hospital in the course of the negotiations to secure minority government?
Well, we wouldn't have done what you guys have done in terms of the independents.
Yeah,
and that's the bottom line, let alone what you've done in government, Ed.
Let's go on to superannuation. Ed Husic, I want to talk about this. The government trying to limit the damage of speculation around this, saying it's only going to be affecting the top 1% of income earners. But beyond that, there's not a lot of detail. The government trying to shut the speculation down, but it hasn't really worked. It's going to continue because we haven't got any of the detail as to what the government is doing. Is Simon Crean right that this is, taxing other people's surplus to try and fund the government's own?
Well, every time around the course of the budget, we're going to get people speculating. We've done this on this show in years past about what may or may not get cut, and you have to wait until or what may or may not get affected, wait until the budget. But I think superannuation, we're proud of the fact that it's really been something that Labor has driven and has been able to see create a national pool of savings. I think it is important that we do everything we can to promote and not hinder people's ability to basically put money into super and see that as a way of offsetting, particularly with an ageing population. I think the other, the concerns that people have expressed, like Simon has in the last few days, has been important to narrow down exactly what may or may not happen in super. We've got the other side of politics saying it'll affect the superannuation incomes of 3.6 million people, in the Liberals taking the sort of ripping out $500 out of people's superannuation accounts. And I think we need to be careful as well that we do this just right in terms of superannuation. And my preference is to wait for the detail, but I am concerned. OK,
well, let's go to Josh on that, because one of the concerns that Ed raised there was about the coalition removing the concession for low-income earners. That is going to affect over 3 million workers. That does diminish your argument somewhat.
Well, there's two clear points about that. Firstly, this government's no friend of low-income earners because it's cut the co-contributions from $1,500 under John Howard to $500 now. So they've actually put their hands in the pockets of the low-income earners. And secondly, that tax offset, which you referred to, is being funded by the revenue that's been expected from the mining tax. $2 billion of revenue the government told us they would deliver. The fact is they haven't delivered anything near that, not a dollar. So the point is, how can we honestly go forward with such a tax offset when there is not the commensurate revenue coming in from the government promises? At the end of the day, this is an attack on aspirational Australians. This is the latest instalment in class warfare, which Martin Ferguson and Simon Crean talked about. And I'm glad that, Ed's come clean today, because he's now joining his colleagues, Mark Bishop and Martin Ferguson and Simon Crean and Kim Carr, all senior Labor members who have echoed the concerns from the economists, from the business community about Labor's cut to superannuation. This is on top of an $8 billion tax grab that the government has overseen on superannuation in the last few years. So they've got no credibility on super. And as we go with forward with an ageing population, the number of people who will be over 65 in our population will double over the next 2 to 3 decades. We need to encourage more people to save. We need to get people off the pensions, and we can do that by getting people to save during their working life. And this is exactly counter to that strategy. So it's a bad decision, and I'm glad Ed is speaking up just like Simon Crean has.
Let's look
can I get your support?
Yeah, sure, Ed.
I was just going to say, can I get your support, Josh, to ensure that you guys that you'll fight Tony Abbott's commitment to do whatever Tony Abbott's basically said, whatever Labor does, we'll adhere to. So you're saying that you're going to fight Tony Abbott on that? No,
Tony Abbott has said that we will be responsible with the books, unlike you have been.
Mm-hmm.
Ed Husic, I want to ask you, though, further to that issue. The government has repeatedly said that it was Labor that built superannuation. Isn't it ironic, then, that they're creating any doubt around this at all when it should be the government's strength? Or one of the strong points.
Kieran, I think we've got a lot to be proud of with super, not just in terms of what we did in setting everything up in the first place, but also, the moves towards increasing the superannuation contribution from 9 to 12%, which is important not just in terms of protecting people's lifestyles as they get older, but also, again, increasing the pool of national savings available in terms of what we need to do as a broader economy and a community. So I think we've got a very proud history when it comes to superannuation.
Yeah.
Kieran, can I just say that it's
Sure,
can I just say that it's pretty interesting that Bill Shorten has now crawled from under the rock where he's been hiding on this issue. He is the responsible minister, and he's been nowhere to be seen. He's allowed Craig Emerson and the Prime Minister to take the punches on superannuation. Now he finally raises his head after been counting numbers in the last week. What's he got to say about this? Is he proud of the fact that they're about to cut super? I doubt so, and that's why he's been so silent in the last few days.
All right, we've on another issue, just to finish, we've seen on the 457 matter, unions critical of the government's of the 457 regime, that supporting the government's crackdown. But the front page of the Australian this morning, Ed, has Tony Sheldon from the Transport Workers Union. He's got 3 people employed on 457s in his own staff.
Well, I think, look, I don't know the details in terms of the situation with the TWU, but what I would say is I think we do need to take a big breath on this whole issue and step back a bit. We obviously need to prioritise and find ways of getting people who are unemployed in Australia into work here. We need to find ways to improve the availability of employment, that is, that it's not just part-time offerings, casual offerings, but full-time as well, and that's been an issue I've been concerned about for many years. So we do need to find a balance in this debate. OK.
Ed Husic, Josh Frydenberg, we're out of time. Thanks, gents. A quick break on AM Agenda when we return. Scott Morrison, the Liberal frontbencher.